for us stream on legal, ethical and privacy challenges in social media. I'm very excited to welcome as our first speaker this afternoon Holly Bennett from the Art Gallery of New South Wales. I personally am a big fan of Holly. Holly will deliver a case study on driving social media creativity whilst dealing with copyright limitations and legal requirements. And I will read you her bio. Holly is a senior creative content producer managing the organic social media channels at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, one of Australia's flagship public art museums. A creative communicator and audience engagement leader, Holly has shaped the changing voice of the Art Gallery online through a momentous time in its history, negotiating complex challenges on artistic, legal and audience fronts. With over a decade of experience in the digital culture sector, Holly brings together expertise in innovative brand storytelling, stakeholder collaboration, crisis navigation and community growth. Please welcome Holly.
Thank you. I would have done a much shorter bio had I known they were going to be read out beforehand. Good afternoon, I am Holly. I manage the organic social channels at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, which is one of Australia's oldest public art museums and the state's premier visual arts institution. The Art Gallery was established in 1871. 2 years ago, opened a brand new building on Gadigal land, and we currently have a social media following of around 750,000 across different channels. The Art Gallery has a wide collection of historic and contemporary art, and it showcases exhibitions from the collection and also exhibitions with loan works from other institutions and from private lenders. So there is a lot of creativity on display and in our touring exhibitions at any given time, not to mention fascinating behind-the-scenes action and a huge network of creative, artistic, passionate people. So with this much rich imagery to share and to use as a creative launch point for our wider social media community, the options for social media seem to be endless, which bring me to my first point. As a state visual arts institution, and one that has a proud history of supporting artists and their works, and importantly their rights, we run into a number of barriers when it comes to social media. Here are just a few. Apologies. We do not have copyright permission to publish this artwork on social media. Contractually, we cannot show the artwork being handled. Unfortunately, the participants did not agree to be photographed. As of today, the artist's estate has retracted all artwork images pending new colour grading, confirming there is a significant licensing fee for that image. This image has been cropped beyond the agreed aspect ratio and is not approved. We've been advised that any online images of this artwork are restricted to a maximum of 415 pixels on the longest side. Urgent unauthorised text overlay on artwork, please advise. Update, artist has included corporate logos in painting, please do not use in social. Unfortunately, the installation image you've supplied appears to have been created with AI and as such contains artworks that are not part of our collection. So these are just a few of the things that we might encounter, from the most basic to some that are pretty unexpected, like that pixel restriction. And here's my disclaimer, which is, as a content producer, I am not a copyright or imagery production rights specialist, so I rely really heavily on my colleagues in our rights department when it comes to restrictions and permissions, and I'm presenting this as a navigator of the field, someone who has frequently run up against things, who has made mistakes, who's had to backtrack, and who's kind of learned to navigate through this field as many others of you across different government departments are doing every single day. I'll focus mostly on image rights in this presentation, but there are a lot of considerations that we have around contractual restrictions, security and insurance, benefactors, and general best practice. And if we have any time at the end, I can also run through a few of these. Now, despite the limitations around image reproduction, we often do find ways to share art with our audiences, and we try and use the interactive features of social media to bring something that engages a step further than our paid social marketing does, and that can develop life across the months of an exhibition period. We do use a lot of video and a lot of animation in our paid social, and we do create a lot of other content that lives outside of social that's created for something bigger like YouTube or for in-gallery presentation that can then have a social media component to it. But as far as things that are created specifically to be used within social, these are some of the examples. Oh, I put a colour transition on that and I totally forgot. There we go. These are just some of the examples of the ways we've been able to showcase art, but also to open the wider world of creativity to engage through social. And I can come back and talk to a couple of specific examples around this. At the art gallery, we often use the shorthand copyright to refer to all of the associated rights around images. And we also use it to refer to our much put upon colleagues in image reproduction, who deal with 1,000 requests a day from all different areas of the art gallery. But there are two main types of rights that apply to reproducing images of artwork, and copyright is just one of these. So copyright is a form of intellectual property that protects the original expression of ideas and enables creators to manage how their content is used. It's concerned with the economic rights around the artwork. The copyright for a work can be sold or transferred, so this is where it can go to an individual, an estate, an organisation, even be transferred to a corporate entity. In general, in Australia, copyright in text, images and music lasts for 70 years after the year of the creator's death. This is different in different areas, and there are variations on this, including by medium and publication status, and what the copyright laws were at the time that the property was created. So, for example, copyright for the artworks of the Australian Art Nouveau painter Sidney Long, they were assigned to the Australian Ophthalmic Research Institute by his estate as a way specifically for them to raise funds for vision research. The Institute is very generous with allowing other non-profits to use the artwork imagery for free of charge with the appropriate credit and social media tag, because they love a tag. But if a company wants to use Sidney Long's artworks in like a major commercial campaign, they'll need to negotiate permission and payment terms with the Institute, not with the artist's estate specifically. The other area that's really important is moral rights. And these are separate from copyright, and they lie with the creator of the work. Even if the creator doesn't own the copyright of the work and they've transferred it, they still retain moral rights to protect their reputation and their integrity. So they can only sit with the individual, you can't assign those away. At its most basic sense, this means that the creator must be credited. It means that you can't say that a person is the creator of a work that they haven't created, and you shouldn't be doing something with a work, like changing it, adding it, altering it in any way that would have a negative impact on the reputation of the creator. Moral rights can be a lot more complex when we're talking about living artists, as they may also have social media, and they may have very strong opinions on whether their reputation has been affected. So sometimes while the copyright might be clear and you have complete permissions to reproduce an artwork in a particular way, the context in which you're presenting it might be something that doesn't sit well with the artist, and that can create some issues. Now, the already complicated world of artist rights and permissions gets really tricky with socials, because what is and isn't okay can change depending on things like who the publisher is. Is it personal social media, or are you publishing on behalf of a company, or are you publishing on behalf of a government institution? What the context is, whether commercial aspects are involved, whether this post links directly to somewhere else that has a full range of credits, and which country's copyright permissions are involved. Here are some assumptions that are generally made about posting artwork on social media, particularly for government institutions or agencies. Come on. Button's not working. It's decided I'm incorrect. Here we go. If a work is in the art gallery's collection, it can be published anywhere. If it's on the internet, it's considered public domain and I can use it however I want. I can make changes to someone's work without asking permission first. If I make changes to someone else's content, it then becomes my own work. I can use someone else's work as long as I credit them. Government agencies have more leeway to use copyrighted material because it's in the interest of the public. I can reproduce without permission, as long as it's less than 10% of the total. And very importantly, if I prompt a generative AI tool to create an image in the style of another artist, it doesn't breach the artist's rights. I really enjoyed creating that. And a key thing around this as well is just to point out that we're not just talking about artworks themselves here, because the photographs of the artworks also have their own copyrights and permissions around them. The photographic image has its own rights, whether it's a photo of a painting or whether it's a photo of something else, like people at an event. So the artwork itself holds copyright, and then so does the photo. So for instance, if the art gallery has a painting on loan from MoMA, MoMA will often supply an image of that for advance press. The artwork credit will be the required artwork caption like René Magritte, blah, 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 from the collection of, but there will also be photo copyright MoMA and often the photographer on that as well. So these are different aspects that, that come into play when you're looking at assumptions around these works. It's not just something exists and I can post it anywhere. It's also looking at the actual material that you're posting. You're posting a photo that has its own rights as well. And all of this is immensely complicated, and this is why there are people whose entire jobs it is to wrangle all of this. So I guess one of the big questions that is important to ask is just why? And it's because as a public service, we're required to be trustworthy, uphold the values that are expected of us, and because it's assumed that material coming from government sources are a point of truth. So there's added weight when the material relates to an area that the government agency is directly responsible for or related to. If, for instance, like the art gallery is posting transport advice about which trains to get to come and visit us, there's an assumption that we're telling the truth because we're a government agency and we're not just inventing a fictional train service. If we stuff it up and tell people to catch the train and there's track work on the line, it's not good. We'll probably get a little bit of backlash, but it will be generally assumed that it's because it's a stuff-up. It's not because of any kind of deliberately deceptive practice. And it carries a different weight than if, for instance, we were Transport New South Wales posting about a train route that isn't available at that time. If, however, we were regularly posting about incorrect train lines or photoshopping bus stops where they don't exist or posting about hover buses or something that was clearly not our area, but also something that was potentially eroding public trust, it would be more than a mistake. This would be something that over time would really erode trust in the organisation, regardless of whether it is our particular area of expertise or not. So when it comes to copyright around artworks and visual art and images in general, as the state's premier arts organisation, the Art Gallery has a special responsibility to be leaders in upholding the standard, but it's relevant to other government departments too. If images used across government social are posted without permissions, or wrongly attributed, or badly edited, or used for unagreed purposes, or they're just generated without transparency or accountability, community distrust grows about the legitimacy of any government communications that are attached to it. So here are some things that I generally use to stop and think about before posting. And these are just some kind of general considerations which essentially boil down to, like, how much do I know about what I've got to post to begin with? Where did it come from? Did I take it? Was it supplied externally? Were there permissions involved in the supply of the image? Was it a reputable source, or was it like an email that was forwarded and forwarded and forwarded on and doesn't really have the original source in there? Who do I need to check with about where this image came from? What is in it? Is it an artwork? Is it an exhibition installation image? Are they sensitive building works? Is it someone else's intellectual property? Is it a specific building shape that has its own permissions around social media? Call out Sydney Opera House. And does everything in there seem to be okay for general social media use? Who is in it? Have the people agreed to be in there? Have you got model permission forms? If there are children in there, have their parents or guardians agreed to this? Can you name all the people for social media? Do they need tagging? Are they going to get offended if you don't tag them? Are they vulnerable people who were not at risk at the time the photo was taken, but in the time you're posting it now, are they now more vulnerable and would be at risk if you were to post it on social media now? If it's an artwork portrait, are these real people who are still alive? Or are they, as something we've had to double check, are they distant relatives of arts patrons or significant community stakeholders who might not be pleased with the way that their great-great-great-grandparents are being showcased on social media? Where is really important in terms of on socials. Is it paid or organic? Does it link back to a website? Is it in stories, only up for 24 hours? Is it in places where it could be reshared, manipulated and recut like TikTok? There are a lot of different concerns around whether you're posting something somewhere that gives essential permission to others to then use the work in their own way. And all of the social media platforms at the moment are revising all of their terms, which makes it really difficult for anybody to actually stick to the closest correct image rights and licensing agreements. And have I done anything with it? So alterations, cropping, zooming, adding in stuff, laying text over, those Facebook Advantage placements that will just take whatever you put out there and then go some fantastic pans and zooms and pop them up into different kind of creative elements that you have absolutely no say over. So all of these are the kind of things that are worth having a think about and considering, have I communicated this for the audience? Part of government social publishing is about upholding those standards of transparency and accountability. And for a visual arts museum, it's even more important that we're holding up these standards. So when we publish, we have image credits, we include ways to find out more info, like links to our website. We indicate if the image has been changed at all. If we're using an image in an unusual context, so if we will use language that might highlight that it's not necessarily the intention of the artist. So we wouldn't assume kind of authority over what the artist meant by the work, unless we either have the artist's words to draw on, but if we're using it in a different context, we would showcase what the context is. The colours in this work are particularly appropriate today because this work reminds us of such and such, so that it really shows that the context that we're sharing it is in kind of an appreciation of art, rather than trying to claim that the artist is saying something with this work that might be completely different to what they actually meant by it. A lot of these really are just going, anticipate what questions might come through from our audience and preemptively answer them in the caption, so that they don't have to stop and think, yeah, but what about that thing? Or is this image AI? Or is this showing something that is on display now? Or is this something that is a historic installation image? All of that kind of info can really help, and was something that was also really useful throughout the COVID period, where it was very important to note in any of our images of people kind of hanging out. This photo was taken before physical distancing requirements. This photo was, people are not wearing masks in this photo because this was taken in 2007. A quick look at some of the ramifications around, I guess, what can happen if it turns out that you've breached your copyright or your rights. You might get sued. Strong chance you won't. In Australia, particularly for government agencies, it's not something that's that common. And I did check with our copyright team to suss this out to begin with, but it is still a possibility. But it's something that there are more likely to be other ramifications, but there is always that strong possibility if you use something that you don't have the rights to, or if you use something in a way that is not correct. Another one, you may also need to pay a large licensing fee. Try and get those sorted beforehand, because otherwise if they sting you afterwards, it can be really tricky. A lot of the time, this will only be around commercial use, but sometimes there are places like other public art institutions. If we would like to feature one of their artworks on our social media, might be an artist we have in the collection, and we would like to just share a work from their collection to say, hey, our such and such is not on display at the moment. Why don't you visit one of our other one of the other institutions interstate? And if we request permission, they might say, that sounds fantastic. That will be $200, please. So sometimes it will be no money required. Let's do a collaboration post. That sounds fantastic. But a lot of these things have to be negotiated through. And for artists and their estates that have strong commercial interests, they're always going to have licensing fees attached. You may become known for substandard, unethical or unfair practice. I feel like I need to adjust my tone depending on what weird transitions I put into this. So if that's bouncing in, you may become known, substandard, unethical or unfair practice. And that's the kind of thing that can have kind of long-standing reputational damage. You may compromise relationships with artists, lenders and partner institutions, and that's the kind of thing that can just have ramifications through your wider government agency, and it can be something that can tie you up in knots and make things very difficult for any kind of future negotiations. You can experience backlash with damage to your community relationships. You can damage trust with the public, with your online audience and with your community partners if you are kind of going rogue with a lot of the things that you're posting. And you may have ongoing impacts like being refused future opportunities, permissions, images, loans or artist cooperation. There have been times when, due to varying circumstances, if an image was used in a way that was not approved, the lending institution has retracted all permissions for future use of that artwork. And if that happens at the beginning of an exhibition and suddenly you can't showcase that in any of your marketing, communications or social media collateral, it gets a little bit awkward. So now going into if all of this whole landscape is so difficult, what are some ways that actually we can use to connect audiences with the creative side? And this is, I guess, assuming that there are some artworks and some images that will have their permissions good to go. They'll be ready to use on social. If they aren't, or if, for instance, you might only have one artwork image and you have 4 months of an exhibition, what can you do to showcase ways in social media and bring a little bit of creativity around these? The main thing to start out with is, what have you got? So what starting out point do you have to communicate? Do you have a source? Do you have an artwork? Do you have an image? Do you have a situation? And what's the way in that you can find for people that draws on what you do have to extrapolate that out? What's actually interesting about what you have to showcase? And this is where we look at things like the actual social media landscape and what the opportunities are throughout these different areas. So ASMR, find some textual and sensory experiences in what we're showing. Really close details. If we only have one artwork that we can showcase, then show it in reveals, show close-ups, do really small areas of the artwork and look at it in different lights. This is what this looks like at 8 in the morning when you won't be in the art gallery and the light is just falling through the window. This is what it looks like at midnight when the security guards are making their rounds and shining their torch. Find out that particular thing that you have to begin with and look at the different ways that you can actually showcase it in different kind of sensory ways. There's also looking at story, like the world in which something happened or the context in which it was created. There are a lot of different aspects that we look at to find out what the stories are behind artworks, the time in which it was created, the atmosphere and social and political landscape around it, and the stories of kind of the people and their tools that they used in order to create things. And these are usually areas that don't have copyright or any kind of rights permissions around, but they're things that you can find out more about and you can create things around. Looking at finding things that might inspire creativity in others and offering creative challenges and prompts for user-generated content. So give people a toolkit for play. And find some unique elements and details that only work in one area to exploit the unique aspects of different social platforms. We had a real problem for years of not being able to show artworks in a strong vertical on any of our social media platforms because everything gets cropped. Things get cropped for Instagram, Facebook, the previews, but everything just looked terrible. And when Threads came along, we posted exclusively long art for the first month because that was the only platform where you could post the entire long thing. And there were a lot of out-of-copyright artworks or ones that had permissions available, but the platforms didn't allow us to show that. So making a unique feature of a limitation is something that you can also look at. We also look at things like working with curators on themes and motifs for exhibitions, particularly if there's only a really limited option to isolate or animate the actual artworks themselves. So I'm just going to jump forward to, this is a little example of some creative in development that we're hoping to showcase for our Magritte exhibition, which only just opened this past weekend. So these are some of the incredible iconic artworks in the Magritte exhibition that look at the elements that he's used, that great, fantastic facade that really resembles the art galleries, the clouds, that collaging trompe-l'oeil sense of moving from one landscape through to another surreal one that's not quite there. We can't, for organic social, which needs to be responsive and interactive, we can't actually take any of these elements from the artworks and offer them around in socials for other people to kind of play with. There's a limited range that we may be able to, but in general, it's not something that we have the option to do. So we're looking at taking some of the elements that actually exist that are out of copyright, like the art gallery's facade, like the beautiful blue clouded skies that are often around the art gallery, and pulling in Giphy stickers that people can use to create their own Magritte-inspired works through Insta stories. And this is the kind of thing that doesn't involve a high barrier to entry for our audiences. It doesn't involve stepping on the toes of the artworks, but it invokes a lot of elements that will be recognisable to people within the context of the exhibition and really allow people to actually have a sense of play through that. There's also been a wish on the a wish expressed from the curators and from the lending institutions that we incorporate some Sydney aspects into our organic socials. And so the iconic Magritte, the kiss, that bird with the incredible clouds, we're looking at taking into some Sydney-specific gorgeous bin chickens and making that available for us to use across social, but also for people to play with on their own. So being able to find these within our kind of Giphy sticker suite and create their own, and looking at, you know, potentially having kind of competitions around these, you know, show us your own, and bringing in a bunch of other Sydney kind of icons, not the Opera House, so that we can, sorry, I keep referencing that. I don't know if any, that one's a long-standing wonderful rights issue where the shape of the Opera House actually has its own very specific permissions to be used. But bringing in some iconic Sydney things that people can use to create their own Magritte in Sydney without actually treading on the toes of the copyright and the rights themselves. This also gives us the opportunity to be more interactive and responsive. We don't need to run all of this once the initial things are approved. We don't need to run all of this directly past the Magritte Foundation to make sure that every single instance of this is approved, because it's not actually playing with the artworks themselves. I also had, I don't know if I have time. I'm probably just about to wind up, but a very quick one to also show you from an historic point of view. And, 10 minutes. Is this 10 minutes left total? Fantastic, thank you. Is just to show that there are some exhibitions that we've had that have had quite complex copyright restrictions and image licensing around them. So that an exhibition might have a whole bunch of loan works, some of them might be, or collection works, some of them might be go for your life, do anything with them. It's great, it's fine, as long as the curators have approved that it's within the keeping, not a prob. And some that have really significant licensing fees, and some that are just, they can only be shown on the wall, and that's it. Don't even touch it. I have no idea how I can play this, but I'm just thinking the second one might be, So this was an example of how we were able to bring some of the Japan supernatural elements out of the 1800s artworks and utilise them in animated social across the kind of art gallery landscape. And this one was pretty easy because it didn't require any specific permissions beyond the curators kind of okaying it. The second one, if it's possible to play the second one without sound, that would be great. This one, and I don't know if we can just like fast forward because it's a bit long, this one used a lot of the same elements and a lot of the same motifs from those artworks, including a lot of the different aspects that came through that were animated, but it took it through into the contemporary time and showed the artworks in situ in the gallery, the ones that couldn't actually be manipulated in any way. So trying to create some connections between and this was that one was by a contemporary artist who was very happy to have his work animated and manipulated as long as he could assist with it. So there were kind of different layers within there, including, there we go. There's like 6 pages of credits on that. I don't think I haven't got controls to be able to take you through the different sections of that, but probably time-wise, that's good. Credits. Please tell our imagery production team that I did supply them. Essentially, there are so many issues and there are so many restrictions and limitations around behaving in an ethically and legally appropriate way when it comes to imagery production. It's hard, but I think my main kind of thing that I would really like to say is that it's worth it for the trust of the creators and the public that we serve. And please always ask your legal people for advice and bring them coffee and treat them with great care because they are the people who have to say no all the time. And if you give them an opportunity to say yes by thinking about this kind of world of how to be creative within those limitations, they will love being able to say yes. Questions?
Hi, my name's Madeline. I'm with the Department of Parliamentary Services, who looks after a really large art collection. And we run into copyright permissions all the time. I'm curious about whether you speak to artists directly, or is that done through your art curators and your copyright team?
That's a kind of a scale of both. Sometimes, depending on, I think, how significant the relationship around that social media production is going to be. If it's something that is, for instance, like a major exhibition that is like a single artist or a few artists, and we're looking at potentially 3 months worth of creative content, we'll absolutely be speaking to the artist. And there's a lot of different kind of meetings and things that discuss how they might like things shown. The artist Leslie Dumbrell, who we just finished a retrospective of, she's in her 80s and she said, do whatever you like. Wonderful, fantastic. But there are some, if it's a one-off, then a lot of the time that will be speaking to the curators. And they're the ones who, if they're living artists, the curators will often have a relationship with them, potentially around the acquisition of the artwork in the first place. So they'll usually be able to give a guideline of, this should be fine. We've got a collection licence in place that, you know, I'll check with if there's a collection licence that covers socials. If that's all done on the copyright kind of side of things, check with the curator and say, is this appropriate? Do we need to check with the artist? And they'll usually advise about whether or not. And copyright will also say, curatorial can advise on the artwork, but we can also check with the gallerist. So if the artist has a gallery representation on a commercial front, they might also check with the gallery just in case to make sure things are okay. But it is one reason why looking at deceased artists from a long, long time ago can be very easy. Hey.
Hey, Holly. David Powell from Blacktown City Council.
Blacktown.
We have quite a good close working relationship with a lot of local Darug artists and try and sort of have that through as many of our publications and things as possible. We do get occasions where a document's about to be hit its deadline and suddenly the executive go, oh, can you put some more First Nations stuff in there? And there's maybe 2 days before the deadline and there's not time to go through the normal negotiations and licensing, etc., because that does take time to do. One shortcut which we did recently was to use existing photographs of public artworks instead of reproducing an artwork. Having now heard your presentation, should we have treated that in the same way? Should we have been getting permissions to use a photograph of a public artwork from the artist?
I think there's probably a bit of a scope there in terms of who owns. Is it public art that's owned by the council?
Some of them, I'm not sure the provenance. They're before my time. There are ones where council has engaged an artist to create a sculpture for a new park or something. But it's, to be honest, we don't. This was a 11th hour solution. We thought, oh, aren't we clever? And I'm now second guessing that cleverness and thinking, oh, maybe we just. Hopefully, no one noticed.
Oh, look. Well, I mean, this is kind of part of the thing of what is best practice, what is kind of practicable from actually knowing what the approvals processes are and how fast things move, and also what the risk is. So what is weighing up what the best practice would be. Yes, if you're featuring an artwork on social media, then you would at the bare minimum be crediting the artist and having the correct copyright attribution on there. If it's public art, generally if you're showing it kind of like in situ in public, it's definitely more of a grey area, and particularly if you're not using it to like sell something. But yeah, there's also kind of weighing up that risk of is it likely that the artist will get in contact and say, hey, I thought I had an agreement in place with Copyright Agency where if that was going to be used anywhere, I would be tagged, you know, or there might be an agreement in place around the commissioning of that public art. So checking out kind of that could potentially save a bit of risk. So I would say it's not best practice. It's definitely something that we've, you know, I would say we've probably done as well. And it's something that is, yeah, I don't want to be the no person, but it depends. It depends on the context, and it really depends on who the artist is and who owns the work as well, and what you're using it for. I would say too, if you're going to other areas and getting photos of other public artworks and things, generally as City Council, if you're featuring artworks from other areas and you're tagging them and you're going, here's this beautiful artwork you can visit, they're probably going to be like, thank you, that was lovely. So yeah, just kind of do as much research as you can about what it is before posting it. And also even factors like, does it relate to any particular event that might be politically or culturally sensitive at the time you're posting it. So find out everything you can about what you're posting beforehand and use your own photos if you can. Yeah. If you use someone else's, you do have to then get permission for that as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
One more question. We still have... Okay.
I'll try and be quick. There is 2 questions. One is, do you use the copyright agency? Do you buy the...
Yes.
Yes, to cover yourself, just in case? Okay. And how do you deal with situations where you've got like an essay of credits that are required, and yet that is going to kind of impact on the performance of whatever content it is? Could be it could be social, or it could be something else.
Yeah, it's trying to find ways around that is huge, because it's not just artwork credits. Sometimes it's artwork credits plus sponsor credits plus benefactor credits, and I've been trying to get that across to curators recently and mock up a bunch of posts and go, this is how much room you have to talk about the artwork, because all the rest of it is credits. So looking at ways that the existing features of socials can be utilised to throw all those in without it compromising the caption. Put it into a graphic. If you're doing Instagram, throw it into a graphic text box, put alt text on it, throw it at the second slide, last slide, whatever, in your carousel. Use your comments to do the, image credits in comments, because at least then it's associated there. It can't be divorced from the original context of the posting. And for things like Twitter and Threads, the general rule is that if it is linking directly to, and for paid social a lot of the time, if it's linking to a wider context, so if it links directly to our website that has the full image credits, all of the attributions and everything that needs to be there, then that direct link is considered sufficient. But that's all kind of been worked through with our rights department, so that's not kind of an industry standard, but that's the way we've been working with the limitations of that kind of platform.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for Holly, please.